everyone. Welcome back once again. We're going to be getting started with our webinar in about 30, 60 seconds. There is a poll that we just launched that we'd love for you to take part in as we get started, and we'll be joining you shortly. Okay, and once again, welcome to the final webinar in our series. This is going to be a great one today, and I just want to cover a few housekeeping items before we dive in. Many of you are enrolled in the CFE program. You will be receiving credits for this series, and once today's session is over, we'll be anonymously posting the attendance records. We'll let you know in tomorrow's email how to find your own record and verify it. You don't need to contact Rose DuPont or anyone else at IFA to receive your credits. We're going to be sending her a list of everyone who has completed the series, and she'll post the credits on her end. It usually takes her a few business days to take care of all that, so maybe just check your account towards the end of next week and make sure that the credits are there if you're looking for them. If you do happen to see an error in our attendance records, you can just reply to tomorrow's email and let us know, and we'll figure that out. And if you've missed one of the previous webinars and haven't already logged in to view the recording, just let us know when you've done so, and that way we can verify that you've completed the series. Tomorrow's email will contain links to all of the recordings and summary sheets so far, so you'll have everything in one place if you want to review anything that we've discussed. And as we begin today's webinar, just remember that we welcome your questions and comments, and I think we're going to have some great and varying perspectives from this panel today. So I hope you all take advantage and participate in the conversation. And I do want to remind everyone that you should be seeing I already mentioned the email, so I'm just duplicating my notes, so just ignore that. So I'm going to just start the recording now, and we can get started on the discussion. Welcome to the fourth and final part of the 2018 FBR Performance Series. Our webinar today is titled Disrupting the Lifecycle. We're going to be talking about the common dip we see in franchisee satisfaction and engagement after your franchisees have been around a few years, and that ties into the poll question we asked as everyone was logging in. So let's bring up the results of that and take a look at how you answered. And more than half of the folks on the call have an agreement between 5 and 9 years. Almost another half are in 10 to 14, and a small minority at 15 or more. And we wanted to use this as an intro because the length of your agreement term can determine how the typical franchisee life cycle affects your system. For some, the low point might come around the same time that you're renewing the agreement, and for others, it's more of a long game with sustaining satisfaction and strong validation through the longer agreement term. So here to discuss what we can do about the franchisee life cycle is today's panel, which features a franchisee-franchisor pair from two different companies. First, we have Tony Lamb, the founder and CEO of Kona Ice, and one of their franchisees, Ted Andrews. And alongside them, we have the president of Verlo Mattress Factory, Kathy Thornton-Bias, and one of the Verlo franchisees, Steve Nystrom. So welcome all, and I'd like to turn things over now to FBR's founder and CEO, Eric Stites, to lead today's discussion.
Thanks, Mike, and welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited about today's session. We've got a bunch of great panelists, and I think we're going to have a really good and interesting discussion today. And Mike did a good job of kind of introducing the data as far as talking about, how the franchise relationship is affected by the term of your franchise agreement. When we look at our data, there is that dip in franchisee satisfaction that follows, kind of and I refer to it often as owning a boat. I happen to be a boat owner myself, and people often say that the best day of a boater's life is the day they buy the boat and the day they sell their boat. And, and unfortunately in franchising, sometimes that holds true with franchisee satisfaction. And so obviously you bring candidates through this development process and get them very excited and fired up about your brand and bring them on board. And, you know, emotionally, and they've really got nowhere to go but down from that point in time. So we're going to spend a lot of today talking about, you know, how do you overcome some of those, I guess, downward trends. Obviously, the best companies that we see dramatically outperform the rest of the franchise companies that are out there, and try and learn from the best as far as what they're doing to kind of set expectations from day one, as far as the franchisee life cycle goes, and then throughout that franchise life cycle, how are they addressing key issues along that franchisee's life. I also want to look at franchisee tenure, because another factor that plays into this is how long franchisees have been around. And like the aging workforce in the U.S., franchisees are getting older every day as well. And if you look at the data, and again, this is based on our recent surveys of over 28,000 franchisees, 40% of franchisees are in that 55 plus age range. So they're getting towards the end of their career. Many of them are thinking about retirement and what may be next. We've got a lot of second and even third generational franchisees coming to the mix. So again, all those factors really play into that franchise relationship and how you keep franchisees engaged and satisfied over time. So what I want to do is I want to start and have each of our panelists kind of give a more detailed intro than we did at the very beginning, to just help set the stage. We've got a very diverse background here, and I think that will be helpful in setting the dialogue. So Tony, why don't we lead off with you, and if you want to share a little bit about your brand and how you got into franchising and how it came to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. My name's Tony Lamb. We started Kona Ice conceptually in 2006, developed the prototypes and started testing the business model in 2007, and I actually decided to do a light franchising start in 2008. We did about 10 franchises in 2008, and then got our feet up underneath of us and then took off. And my background has been in marketing, so I am not a veteran of franchising. I realized I wanted to scale the business, and you've got a couple options, and franchising to me was the best option to scale as I wanted to scale it. We are now 2018. We're over 1,000 franchises, and I think we have about 600 franchisees. So we have a lot of multiple unit owners. We have a very high or a very diverse makeup in our demographics. That chart that Eric just shared with everybody, I think we have that very well. We got a lot of retired people in Kona. We started in 2008, which, by the way, phenomenal time to start a business. Slight recession going on, but seemed to work out in our favor in a lot of ways. But the diversity of our franchisees is truly amazing. My first 18 franchises, I had several that were below the age of 25 and several that were above the age of 65. So I thought that was kind of then a couple, and I thought that's the way it was going to develop. And it's been a wonderful ride so far in 10 years. Knowing the fact that I'm the newbie on the block, doing things at a kind of a fast pace, because we're not a brick and mortar, so it allows us to scale more quickly, and that's where we're at. Our satisfaction has been the last 6 years. I think we've been number 1 or number 2 in category food and beverage. And then last year, we were number 1 overall. I think last 2 years, maybe we were number 1 overall. And so very proud of that. That is the metric that we gear in this company. We talk about franchisee satisfaction continuously. Everything we develop is about franchisee satisfaction. So I'm excited to be here, very, very honored to be involved in this, and hope I can help in any way.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, Tony, because it's funny when you came onto our awards list back 5-6 years ago. Many in the industry hadn't heard of you, and I hadn't heard of you, and like, who's this Kona Ice, and what are they all about, and how'd they get to be number one, and it's funny because now obviously franchisors are very competitive, and as you know, I mean, we have a lot of clients that call us and say, what is Kona doing? Well, how did they get to be number one? I want to be number one, and so a lot of people are gunning for that position. As you know.
Yes.
So Ted, share a little bit about how you came into the Kona scene.
Sure. In 2009, I was a regional director with Starbucks, and when I went with them, I thought they were bulletproof. They were really for quite a few years, but economic headwinds at the times caught up with them, and they ended up downsizing. I got part of that. In late 2009, I found myself without employment. So I did not want to go back to work conventionally or traditionally anymore. I wanted to own my own business. So I spent about 9 months or so researching franchises. And I looked at everything from Stanley Steamer to restaurants to sports clips. And Kona Ice actually came on my radar in, I think, October of 2009, but the timing of it wasn't perfect. Not wanting to get in the shaved ice business in October, and I kind of forgot about it until March when there was an article in the newspaper again. And keep in mind, I had spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different franchises by this point when Kona Ice reappeared to me in March of 2010. And what made the difference to me was no matter what model I chose, whether it was sports clips or Subway or I went down the road actually with one called 10,000 Degree Pizza. But if I opened a sports clip, there's not going to be 10,000 people that all of a sudden start getting their hair cut that weren't getting their hair cut. All I could hope for in any franchise system I looked at was carving out a small piece of the pie and hoping that piece was enough to feed my family. When I looked at Kona Ice, it was the whole pie. There was nobody else that had that delivery system, nobody else that had that community give back, had that involvement. And having the whole pie as opposed to a piece of the pie was very appealing to me, and that's what pushed me to Kona Ice.
Great. So now we want to switch over to our second group of panelists. And Kathy, if you want to share a little bit about your brand and how you came to be involved with the brand as well.
Sure. Well, thank you again for organizing this discussion. I'm not sure we could have any more sort of polar opposites talking about ice and mattresses on the same call, but hopefully we'll pull it all together for the listeners. Verlo is a 60-year-old brand that I'm very happy to have a founder family member here as a franchise owner, Steve, who's going to be speaking to you in just a moment. Verlo is owned by Marcus Investments, which is a private equity arm of the Marcus family. The Marcus family is the controlling stakeholder in Marcus Corp, which is a publicly traded company at about 880 million market cap. And the family over multiple generations has been very successful as both a franchisor and a franchisee. One of the primary revenue streams for Marcus Corp is the hotel and resort business. So when they were looking to create the private equity company Marcus Investments and then purchase other companies that they felt could be compatible and sort of bolt-ons for Marcus Corp, hospitality particularly, Verlo came onto their radar. And I think what attracted them to Verlo is still what makes us so excited about the concept today, which really is their culture of customer service. We enjoy very high net promoter scores from our customers, in the high 70s, which is higher than Amazon, higher than Apple. We provide a service that's quite unique because we are a vertically integrated retailer, which just means that we are the manufacturer, the wholesaler, and the retailer of our own product. So there's no middleman, and we're able to pass that value on to the customer. Most of our franchise owners are very tenured. They've been in our system, for 15, 20, 25, 30 years in some cases. In some cases, we've been their sole source of employment as an adult. They've kind of grown up in the system. And I would say what keeps us together as the Verlo family is really our commitment to the sleep category. Not just the product of mattresses, but the idea that sleep really matters. And right now, we're really benefiting from the great press and science and data that talks about the importance of a good night's sleep. And so when you think about your overall health and well-being, doctors talk about the triad. It's your diet, of course, it's your exercise, and now it's your sleep. And so, a mattress is a mattress is a mattress, as they say. But the idea of getting a good night's sleep and being able to customize a mattress for your customer in your local factory means that we never have to say no. And so whether it's a double-sided or a single-sided mattress, whether you want it super firm or extra cushy, because we build them ourselves, we have that technical expertise, we're able to do things for our customers like a lifetime comfort guarantee that no other company is able to do. And so we've enjoyed this cult-like following literally for almost 60 years. And I think our biggest opportunity is still ahead of us.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that background. And Kathy, can you share too what the average investment level is from a franchise perspective?
Mm-hmm. So we operate 3 different retail concepts, and actually Steve will be able to talk to you a little bit about that. He'll be starting that himself shortly. We have satellite stores that operate in about 2,500 square feet. They're quite lean and mean. There's no factory, of course, attached to those, and that opening cost is just under the $400,000 mark. When you move into a hybrid store, that's about 5,000 square feet on average. It's where we have a comfort adjustment room attached to the satellite showroom, and that cost is just under the $500,000 mark. And then when you talk about our factory stores, which is where we have owners who are not only selling at retail the factories, but also building the beds in their attached factory, those operate in a little bit less than 8,000 square feet. And those come in just under the $700,000 mark, and that's all in, so including fees, startup for 3 months, materials. Luckily, we have very low inventory because everything is sort of built and custom built when the order is placed. So we're not in a situation of having perishable inventory or high inventory levels compared to other retail and franchise concepts, which is great. We also have a very high turnover and a very high average ticket. So we don't need lots of people to make this business financially very, very profitable and sort of very turnkey compared to other concepts.
Great. Thank you for that. And last but not least, Steve, when we were doing our prep for this call, I've met a lot of people that are multi-generational franchisees, second, third generation franchisees, but you were literally born into franchising, and so I would like to have you kind of share your story and how you came into the Verlo business.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So the Verlo name comes from the founders' wives, half their first names, Verna and Lois, and Verna was my great aunt, my grandpa's twin sister, who, back in 1957, they started as a small furniture store in a strip mall, and then kind of just built it from there. They saw the need for mattresses, and they kind of got out of furniture altogether and started going after mattresses. In 1987, my dad started a franchise he was one of the first ones to move out of the Chicago, Wisconsin area down to St. Louis, Missouri, where we're at now, and started his here. I was 5 years old then, so I've been around mattresses a long time already, even though that I've only been dealing with them personally, running everything for about 5 years. But I grew up watching Verlo grow just by going to the annual meetings, and back then, everything was centrally located in the middle of a cornfield, and that's kind of where our store is now. And well, it used to be. Now it's all built up around with houses. But I watched. My dad watched Verlo grow, and that's what kind of made him, once he got established in the family growing. He was in the airline business, and they were transferred from Chicago to St. Louis. That's how he ended up here, and it was getting kind of iffy where, he wasn't. I don't think he liked his job at all. So he was adamant on starting his own business, and he couldn't get away from watching the fact that Verlo grew so fast and started franchising out, and that's when he started. And then I've watched it through all these years just grow and grow. And then I got into it 5 years ago. Before that, I built houses for a union company for 5 years, and after I was tired of that, my body was tired of doing that. I worked on a really large 3,500 acre grain farm for the last 10 years. And then, with my dad, I was always around the mattresses. Just, I never worked there, but I knew kind of what was going on and knew all the employees and everything. And Dad was kind of losing interest to where it was kind of affecting the customer aspect of taking care of our customers. That's always what we pride ourselves on. And I don't know if he was losing interest or just kind of burnt out after 25 years of doing it, but I started talking to the employees that have been there for a long time, and they're like, "Hey, what's going on? Your dad he's kind of missing in action here lately." And that's when I kind of realized that something needed to be done, and kind of sat down and had a family conversation on me coming to work at the business and then eventually run the business. And now we're in the talks of at the end of this year transferring the business over to my name, and I'll be paying his retirement with him selling me the Verlo name, and then I'll lease his building. And that's how I kind of got into it, just a family meeting, and kind of just stepped in, and it's been all great since then.
Awesome. Well, thanks each of you for sharing that, because I think it is important to kind of get that background to understand the franchise relationship and ways to, I guess, really keep that franchise satisfaction steady throughout the life cycle of a franchisee. And for everybody on the call, that I don't know if you go to IFA or not, but if you've ever crossed paths with a gentleman named Greg Nathan out of Australia, he's got a lot of great resources specific to the franchisee life cycle. One of his books, The Franchise E-Factor, addresses this exact kind of dip that we talk about, and he's got a second book called Profitable Partnerships. And if you haven't read, I'd highly recommend each of those books. And I think you can get them both on Amazon. But it just talks about those stages, those common stages of the franchisee relationship, from absolute, starting with glee and kind of bottoming out in the middle there phase, and then hopefully kind of seeing the light and coming to that we stage at the end. And so I guess to start, I'd like to ask Kathy and Tony, from the franchisor perspective, is this kind of honeymoon phase going by, and and kind of that dip something that you see in your systems? And, you know, is it a problem? Is it just, you know, kind of a natural thing that you know, anticipate with all franchisees? And I guess, you know, what strategies do you have in place to kind of preempt it? So why don't we have Kathy just start on that?
I think that the slide illustrates the life cycle accurately. I think it illustrates life cycles in general. So whether it's the franchisee life cycle, you could use this for product life cycle, you could use it for human life cycle. It's really kind of the beginning, the middle, and the end. And the work is what happens between, you know, those sections. And what I think as franchisors, we spend a lot of time talking about and being trained on franchise development and sales, of course, because, you know, we want to grow our systems and grow our footprint and our brand reach, et cetera. But organizationally, we don't spend a lot of time talking about what happens after the beginning, meaning the middle and the end. And so I think if there were any opportunity that we could all take away from today's webinar, would be to ask for more you know, content and thought leadership on what to do in the middle and in the end, because it's not something that we hear a lot about at conferences. You know, we focus so much of our time and attention on selling franchises, and once we sell them, there is like this great euphoria on both sides, but the real work comes after that FDD is signed. The real work comes year 4 and then year 8. That's actually when the real work, or year 28 in our case, that's right, where the real work comes in. And so I would say that, yes, it's a very accurate graphic, but the disproportionate amount of time that we spend as franchisors thinking about, planning about, working on the beginning of the cycle is far less important than the work we should be putting in on the middle and end of the cycle.
Yeah, that's a great point. Tony, how about you guys? You know, is this a common experience in the Kona system as well?
You know, it's called honeymoon phase for a reason. It really is. I mean, it's not like we're developing this concept on our own. This is life. Just what Kathy had said. This is exactly the way almost everything that we do works. Everyone comes in with great enthusiasm. And I think lately we have been very, very focused on, because what we've done is we've looked at some of our franchisees over the years that have been maybe less satisfied. We have maybe we could talk about later, a program called Elevate. Once a franchisee gets to a stage, and we have identified them and we put them on an Elevate program, which is really trying to get them out of that slump, wherever it is, whether it's year 2 or year 4 or year 6 or 8 or whatever. It's an Elevate program. But so we started looking for commonalities in those people, and then started trying to do a better job of vetting as they came in. And I know I'm fortunate in the world that I have more people trying to get into my franchise system than I have inventory to supply them. So we can be a little bit, but that wasn't the case in the early years. We were selling like most people do. You know, if you have a check and you have a pulse, we're going to figure out a way to get you into our franchise system, which maybe that's the way people have to start. And to some degree, I don't want to say it was that, but to some degree that was the case. But we focused heavily on doing the due diligence up front, really looking for somebody that has a propensity to, or whatever to be dissatisfied over time, or to be not as engaged over time. What are they trying to get in the business for? So if we can get them in the business for a different reason or an additional reason besides just finances, is it to make their community better? Is it to engage with their family? Is it to these kind of ancillary desires to have your own business? And that's kind of helped us. Now we also we also focus a lot on our annual conventions, our regional meetings that we have yearly, our surveys and things like that, to try to really stay in touch with them, keep them very, very engaged, especially in the beginning, so we can kind of hear the pathway and the direction that they're on. So yeah, I mean, I think we all experience this to a degree, monitoring, and that's why I love FBR, is because you guys do one of our surveys for us. We used to survey our franchisees a couple times a year. FBR gives us that anonymity, or that where it's not us surveying them, it's a different company surveying them, and we pore over those results and look at that, look for trends, look for things that we are failing at that we can make sure that we do a better job. But I really do think a lot of it starts in the beginning as you're bringing people in with expectations. Really, what are you trying to get out of this change in your life buying this franchise? Are you trying to step away from, I don't know, it's possibly like marrying somebody for the 11th time. You might be a little bit cautious if you're going in on the 11th time. It might be an internal thing and not an external thing. So these are the kind of things you're trying to identify that you can kind of move forward on. But I do think, listen, the scale is accurate. I've read the E Factor. I think it's very insightful. I had a consulting company early on, before I knew anything about franchising, had kind of shared that with me, and I thought, I'm going to fight hard for that not to be the case.
Right. Well, it seems to be working.
Eric, let me join in on this from a franchisee perspective. Tony mentioned the convention, and I think you're fairly familiar with it. It's definitely the high water mark of the year for a franchisee, and even though it seems like a fixed royalty is a compelling reason to join our franchise system, and it is. Initially it is. But after so many conventions, I've never seen anyone dancing at a convention because they have a fixed royalty.
Yeah.
They're dancing at the convention and they're enjoying themselves, and they're very enthusiastic because of their connection with the culture, the model, the community, the give back, the camaraderie that they have with other franchisees and the franchise system, between them and corporate. So I think initially there's some glee over having a fixed royalty, but sustaining that is the culture of the company.
Right. No, that's great point. Ted, from your own perspective, did you go through that dip? I mean, did you have, a period where the honeymoon was over and you were like, oh crap, what did I get myself into?
Yeah, I think probably everybody does to a degree, and I ended up growing at a fairly rapid rate, and whenever that happens, I think that adds a certain anxiety level to it. But on the other hand, the reason I did that and was able to do that is I saw the future of what I could accomplish and what my growth could be and what my sales could be. And additionally, I knew that this was a franchise system that I could flourish in, mainly because I got to be an entrepreneur within the structure of the franchise. So, this is so unique in the sense that, we don't have a lot of franchise rules compared to your traditional franchise. So I got to be an entrepreneur, I got to be a businessman, I got to run my own business, make my own decisions, decide what products I'm going to carry, what flavors I'm going to carry, what prices I'm going to charge, what days I'm going to work, what focus I'm going to put in my business. All those were within my control, and I knew that would be that way in year 3, in year 5, in year 7. And that was so appealing to me that I knew that the end game, the long game, was going to be as satisfying for me as the second year.
Great. Steve, how about you? I mean, you obviously are a little bit unique in that you were familiar with the business from a family perspective for a long time. And so did you have a similar, dip or honeymoon period come to a screeching halt after you got involved in the business full time?
I would say my graph is a little bit different. Verlo was pretty broken about 10 years ago, to where I would say that's where our dip was. For me, it just wasn't ran very good on the corporate end. And then, it was kind of a breakup from the franchisee and franchisor. Everybody was kind of doing their thing, and there wasn't really rules. So I would say our honeymoon is still in the working. I've seen in the last, I've been involved for about 6 years now, and I've seen nothing but a trend going upward towards that honeymoon. So I guess where I was going with that, it's really important to have a good franchisor, to start with, to see that honeymoon phase. But yeah, I would say my graph's a little bit different. I say my honeymoon is still to come with the new franchisor, because the old franchisor was just not weren't doing their job at all.
Right. Tony and Kathy, just talking about, this franchise life cycle and it's obviously very common. I'm just curious from the franchisor perspective, what the two of you do in the development process, I guess, to just ensure that franchisees are coming in. We hear it over and over again from franchisees that, what they ended up buying wasn't quite what they thought. And I'd just like to hear from each of you talk about what you do specifically with candidates to kind of help set realistic expectations to, again, soften that curve. And Tony, why don't we lead off with you?
I think the really openness of the validation process is important. Listen, I shoot a webinar every single year, and I shoot that webinar for prospective franchisees to watch. And the longer I've noticed, and I've got, I guess, 6 of them or maybe 7 of them on file now, and you can go back and watch all the way from the beginning. I'm in my basement of my house talking about these dreams. And the last one, I'm walking around our corporate facilities, and it's nice, and we've got a big corporate staff and the evolution of that. But it really is important to make that the transparency in the validation process. I want you to call all my franchisees if you want to. Call the ones that maybe have left the system. I had a franchisee that said, I got in because I spoke with the 7 people that left the system, and they were as flattering of the company as the people that are in the company. And so that's important. So having that transparency and even in my webinars, I'm very setting of expectations. Listen, if you're not used to sweating, don't get into Kona ice, because there are moments when you sweat. You will curse the weatherman and possibly God for the weather because of the business that we're in. When you have a great 4th of July booked and it's a large percentage of your monthly income and you have 3 days of torrential rain, you're going to be upset. And you have to get those concepts and those ideas out there, because that's the seed of dissatisfaction when those things happen if they don't know it's coming. And no one likes to have it come, but it is. So we do a lot, talking about the bad parts. Everything on our sell site, our own Kona site, is so positive. Tons of testimonials, tons of things like that. We're obviously not going to talk about the bad things. I think it's more personal when I come back in a webinar and say, hey, here's some of the challenges that Kona goes through, Kona franchisees go through. And then when I'm talking to every single one of them on the phone, and I make sure I talk to, after they've come through a certain level, I probably have 5 to 10 calls a week where I'm talking to prospective franchisees that have gone through a certain process at this point. But I'm probably the most negative person they talk to, in the fact of, hey, tell me about your expectations. How are you going to work the business? Or one of you going to quit your job? Or one of you going to do this? Or one of you and I try to really get in there and find out if someone's stepping away from a $150,000 job with benefits and going to buy a Kona ice truck and start from a dead stop and try to replace that income the first year. I'm going to say no. I think that's a bad idea. You've got to have some reserves in that. So I'm very real and upfront, and try to get those expectations in line as hard as I can. And I think that plays out on the other side of it for us.
Great. Kathy, how about you? What do you guys do in Burlow to kind of set those expectations right out of the gate?
Well, I think we have, or I've been told that we have an unusually long onboarding process. And, I think people expect that because our category is something that most people use every night. Everyone sleeps on a mattress. So there's this idea that people have an inherent understanding of what that looks like in a retail sense. But the running of a mattress business and a mattress store is nothing like people imagine it to be. And so we do a lot of on-site shadowing and training in our flagship stores. And I would say the thing that we do most, and Steve could probably speak to this also, we spend a lot of time, personal time, with our franchise owners. Yes, we have webinars. Yes, we do on-site training. Yes, we have training here at headquarters. But what we do best, I think, is that we actually spend time with our franchise owners. When Steve comes to town, he will have dinner with my husband and I on our date night. That may seem a little awkward, but that's sort of how we do things here. I've been meeting with a franchise owner, and his first grandson is born. And he's like, do you want to go to the hospital? I'm like, are you sure you want me there? So we spend a lot of time getting to know one another, because the hardest thing is that you have to have a relationship and a body of trust that can be tested and still survive. And so you build that trust, and you build that respect, and that sort of that I've got your back, you've got my back, over time and through actions, not through words. And so while I think it's great to have a body of assets, creative assets that talk about your culture and your vision, nothing replaces human interaction. And I speak about this topic a lot at conferences, but I think we use so much technology to get points across and to be efficient and time management, and that's all great, but nothing replaces human interaction. And what you find often is that when you get to meet the person in person, a lot of things come out of that. And so although we are a smaller and older franchise, we call it the Burlow family. And in some cases, like Steve's, it is literally family. In other cases, it's family through friendship and family through years of working together. Because families go through good times and bad times, but you're still family. And so I think we've created this really good balance of the professional relationship with the personal relationship, so that when things get bad and we have to have really tough conversations, it doesn't get personal, and it doesn't take away the trust that we worked really hard to build. We can still be angry at one another, but we can still come back to the table and have really productive conversations about these really tough topics and get to an end result where everyone can win. And I think that's because of the personal human interactions that we prefer to have as a company versus so much reliance on digital.
Right. Well, it's interesting. One of the things that we like to do is to highlight different nuggets that come up in these sessions for everyone out in the audience. And Kathy, I think you just touched on a good one right there, is to invite franchisees on your date night with your husband or your spouse. I think that's great.
I don't know what Steve thinks about it, but I mean, they're becoming like pros now. So
had I known that, I would have invited your husband to be on the panel as well, so he could speak.
Exactly.
One thing that a thought that came up last session that I didn't share, and I was reminded of again today as you guys were just talking. There's a number of companies that do personality profiles that they're not all of them are franchise specific. If you go to the IFA's website at franchise.org and search their supplier directory, you can find a variety of companies that do personality profiles. And it's not used as a selection tool per se, but it helps you better understand the person that you're engaged with and that ultimately might become a franchisee. And related to our discussion the other day as well as today is you can really look at those profiles for a person's openness to change. Obviously, change management is a huge part of any franchise organization, and if you've got somebody that's showing a very limited capability of change, that may be a red flag for you as well. And then also just look at various attitude factors. So again, are they a positive entrepreneurial type person, or are they kind of more that Eeyore, everything is always gray skies and not sunshine and rainbows. And so knowing that, having them do a personality profile, again, not to eliminate someone as part of the development process, but at least to understand what the type of person that you're dealing with and how those factors may be addressed, I think is important. So just a quick informal poll to the audience, if you want to chime in, just a simple yes or no. Anyone using personality profile as part of their selection process today and finding that effective? Looks like we've got a number of people that are saying yes. So again, if you're not, that may be something to check out and look into. I want to talk a little bit to Ted. I think you brought up a good point, and again, get that franchisee perspective from you and Stieg. Ted, you mentioned the conference being a big event, and just that culture of getting together with franchisees. It's not about royalties; it's about those relationships that you've built, and that's really a huge part about being with this brand now. Specifically, what do you think that franchisors can do to facilitate that? Because I've attended the Kona conference. I haven't had a chance yet to go to Verlo's. I'm hoping to get to Verlo's in the near future. But it's Kona's conference is very different from many franchise events that I've attended, and again, it's very family oriented. And that's not just the franchisees doing that. I mean, obviously that's facilitated by the franchisor. And I guess Ted, if you can speak to, what do you think that Tony and his team do well to kind of facilitate that culture?
Sure. To me, the company is so progressive, and if you 10 years ago, if you say, well, how do you make snow cones progressive? That would have been a tough question to answer. But, Tony and Kona Ice have figured that out. And I think people's expectations when they come to convention are typical in the sense that you expect you're going to learn a little more, and you're going to hear from the leadership of the company, and there's going to be a few breakout sessions that you can gain some nuggets from, and I think that's pretty standard wherever you go to convention. But with Kona Ice, it's revealing the future. It's it's the newest line of merchandise, or the newest cup, or it's VitaBlend, or it's Fruit First, or it's a companion, or it's a 2.0, or a crafted truck, or a crafted line of flavors. And and I think that's one of the ways, by the way, that you keep tenured franchisees engaged in the company, is because this company is moving forward at Olympic speed. And if you don't stay up with that, you're going to get left behind. So, aside from the traditional benefits of having a convention, just being part of the progressive vision of the company and finding out what those reveals are and being excited about it, I think that's the real gravity of people going to a convention.
Great. Thank you. Stig, how about you? Either within Furlough and in other businesses that you've been in, what do you think that the franchisor can do to better facilitate, that culture of, family and openness with franchisees?
Just the excitement to, as a franchisee, your goal is to grow your business and be profitable, without, 90, 100 hours a week. If it has to be done, it has to be done. But to see the franchisor just as excited, if not, or just as excited as you are to grow the franchise, that really makes it it's intriguing just to have that excitement, cast upon you from the franchisor. To see that excitement to grow and make money and be profitable, it just makes it makes me want to try harder as a franchisee, just to go as hard as I can. And, when I see they're going as hard as they can to make us profitable, it's hard not to want to return the favor and be profitable for them. And then it's just a win-win.
Right. Tony, you mentioned the surveying your franchisees, kind of, monitoring progress of franchisees to kind of see where their heads are at. I'm just curious to learn more about, how you identify franchisees that are headed for trouble. You mentioned your Elevate program, which obviously is addressing, franchisees that are in trouble. So can you just talk a little bit about your process at Kona as far as first identifying those folks that are getting ready to walk off the cliff and how you talk them off the ledge?
Yeah, I think that's something that we picked up on as we started doing more surveys, and then the FBR survey even coming back. And what we saw when people felt like they were talking to a third party, I thought it was even more revealing. And we had 83% participation in the FBR survey, and we probably have 80 or 75, maybe 80%. It's always better with FBR because I think people feel like they're talking to somebody in the industry. So that was kind of shocking to me, to be honest with you. But it's not just that. It's also what you do is you're looking at supply purchases. You're looking at engagement factors. We put out monthly newsletters and video newsletters and different things like that. And we look at the open rates. Who's not opening the corporate stuff? Who's not buying enough inventory that we know their numbers are going down? Then we also have two closed Facebook groups. We have what's called the Kona community group that's monitored by corporate, and we can chime in and help, and there's a lot of information shared. And then there's a franchisee group, a closed group that only the franchisees are on. Now, fortunately for me, I've got some franchisees that are very close to corporate, and if things go wildly awry on that site, they usually kind of reach out and say, "Hey, listen, this is a topic on the closed group, or the what do they call it, the franchisee group, and these are some subjects that need to be brought up, or this is a person that's blah blah blah." And again, with 600 people in the system, it's hard to monitor every single person. But as we look for these things, survey results, engagement factor, opening up newsletters, all these different things, and just their feedback. And guys, listen, we have a 30-day call-in as soon as they come to Kona College, and we train them. They go out and they stay together as a group. We usually have somewhere between 10 or 15 people in a college. We keep them together as a group. We have 30-day, 60-day, 90-day follow-up calls. Then we're doing surveys and getting answers and questions from them, and then putting them in peer groups. That's why the convention is also important too. Is people will tell me we have 3-day conventions, and we have tons of breakouts. We bring in specialists and marketing specialists and customer service specialists, and then a lot of the veteran franchisees train and teach and coach. And the breakouts are really good. But I will say that the franchisees talk about it's the time between the breakouts that they love the most. It's the ideation where they sit in round tables and talk about improvements for the business or improvements for the equipment and things like that. when they get to know people and they get to share and they develop these and form these relationships, and then they get to reconnect at convention every year. It's like a giant reunion when they come together. And by the way, corporate subsidizes this heavily. I know companies that use this as a moneymaker, and I think our franchise or our fee to come to a convention is about $250, and it costs me probably $600 or $700 per franchisee. And we supplement that because we know how important it is. We don't want it to be free necessarily, because we want people that are at least to have to do a little bit to be engaged, to be have some skin in the game, so to speak. And but our attendance is really high. We had over 1,000 people, I think, at the last convention or whatever, and it's very inexpensive. The hotel rates are great, and it's in February in Cincinnati, so it's not like we're putting it on at Disneyland. They have to come to Cincinnati in February. And yeah, we had you scheduled one time and the snow took you out, and those are the kind of things that I think really all together, that's when you're looking for and searching for, and we search heavily for people that we can put on the Elevate program. And all that is just extra attention, one-on-one training. You assign a mentor, you assign a coach, you let the neighboring franchisees have a helping hand out, very, very covertly in a lot of ways. But then you up their social media spend, you up our ad fee to them a little bit, or not their fee, but their ad spend a little bit. We pump up their Google AdWords. We try to generate, and if it worst case scenario, I know Ted is very instrumental in the Elevate program. And I've put him on a plane before and sent him to a location where there's 4 or 5 new franchisees, and he facilitates the relationships. And those are things that you got to do constantly, all the time.
Right. For everybody on the call, I want Tony to actually repeat the fact that, or I'll repeat for him, that his conference is in February in Cincinnati, and he gets close to 100% attendance. So you must be doing something right for sure. And I think getting people to conferences is critical for so many folks. And oftentimes it's those people that are in trouble that aren't the people that are going to conference. Kathy, how about you guys? What do you do just to kind of monitor franchisees' progress and identify when they're getting ready to walk off the cliff before they realize they're about to walk off the cliff?
Yeah. Well, I will, sorry, Tony, I'm going to one-up you. Getting people to a conference in Milwaukee at that time of year is probably a little harder than Cincinnati. The weather here is not the most attractive part of our proposition by far. But I think we do use our conferences as a way to not only, create entertainment and camaraderie around our culture, but also, significant and what we call important business content. And so typically we will create an idea that drives sort of an immersive theme that supports, either our strategic plans for the year or our kind of, goals for the year. So last year I had the owners come to Milwaukee to the Rusty Wallace racetrack, and we were driving Formula One cars at 110 miles an hour around this track. Now you might say that's crazy. All of your franchise owners could die in one fell swoop, but it actually was great because it gave them the immersive experience of my theme and my message for the conference, which is that we are going to grow fast and go fast. So I wanted to give them the physical experience of what going fast felt like. And I think, and Steve can jump in, I think it was actually one of the favorite, conferences that we'd had in a long, long time. This year, we are celebrating our 60th anniversary. And again, it's balancing, as Tony said, the idea of creating, really important business content, but also creating a good time. And so we did that in Vegas. Our company owns a property there, and we have an Elvis impersonator, come. We rented out the high roller Ferris wheel there called the Link. We had magicians, and then we had a lot of hard content as well. So it's always this balance between giving people a reason to leave their stores and leave their business. Many of our owner-operators business every day, and so to have them and their spouse or their partners come it has to be meaningful. And so again, that physical interaction I think is super important. One of the opportunities that Verlo has is that we need to do a better job of building that same kind of human connection and contact outside of the conference. So we do a lot of one-on-ones with owners visiting us and us visiting them, but as a group, we don't do a good enough job, I think, getting ourselves together outside of conference. And so one thing we've done is to build what I call working committees that really focus in on the key departments or the key areas of our business. So marketing, product and development, et cetera. And those have worked beautifully. Stieg happens to sit on the product committee. They have made some headway in areas that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime at Verlo. I mean, they've made some major improvements. I'll let him talk about that. But having your franchisees work on topics and themes and ideas that are materially important to the whole system outside of the conference gets people engaged. It gets them a seat at the table. They feel valued. We love their information and insight because they're working on this every single day. We're not. And so that's become a big win-win for how we organize and structure ourselves as a company.
That is a great point, and and I'll highlight that as definitely another nugget for people, and that's a best practice that we share with a lot of clients, newer clients as well, as far as getting as many franchisees involved in task forces, subcommittees as possible. So many companies just have an FAC, and oftentimes that FAC isn't seen as representative. They're kind of the favorites of the franchisor, and everybody else doesn't feel that they're involved. So I know many systems that have every franchisee either on FAC or on some sort of subcommittee. So whether it's marketing, communications, product development, as you said, Kathy, as if you can get somebody involved in every part of the organization, that will just definitely help with engagement and really keep them satisfied over time, and also give them a view from the the franchisor's perspective as well. As it's easy to sit there and say, oh, we want this, we want this, we want this, but when you see it more from the franchisor side as what some of those challenges are, I think that gives franchisees much more balance.
Can I just add one piece to that?
Yeah.
I think it's a bad habit that we as franchisors have, which is we're always trying to convince the franchisees that our way is the right way. And so we organize these committees sometimes to be self-serving. And what we've learned recently at Verlo is that the more we let the franchisees behind the curtain, if you will, and give them real insight and visibility into our vision for the company, and then tactically how that vision will manifest itself, and what are these pieces and parts that we need to accomplish for that vision to come to fruition, they get it. These are smart men and women who have been, in some cases, doing this thing longer than I've been alive, right? So they're very smart, they're very sophisticated, they have a huge passion for the business, and similar to coming from a place like a Starbucks where you have tremendous operational and infrastructure knowledge, we can benefit from that. The franchisor doesn't always have to have all of the answers. It's okay to rely on your franchisees and to use their expertise from other companies or other businesses or other franchises that they own, and bring all that knowledge together for the benefit of all. So we try to have it be a mutually beneficial and a two-way street. And by doing so and taking sort of the franchisor off the throne and having the franchisor with the people, we found that the tone and the tenor of the conversations and the outputs have really improved. Again, I would leave it to Steve to talk more about, but.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And, and I think going back to our question about setting expectations is I think that's great to talk about at Discovery Day or during the development process when you're talking with candidates, because, you don't want them coming in with the expectation that, everything the franchisor is going to deliver everything to me. And, it's not a one-way thing. And, that franchisor community and that franchisee network is a huge part of why anybody should join a franchise organization. And I think that's often overlooked. It's okay, what is the franchisor doing for me? And I think, setting that expectation again up front is important. So yeah, let's, Stieg, if you can talk a little bit, going back to this idea of addressing franchisees heading for trouble. I mean, is there a time when, in your 5 years or so that you can think of that, you were getting ready to walk off that cliff and, and someone at corporate talked you off the ledge or redirected you? And, and I guess what do you see as a franchisor's team can provide that's really valuable for franchisees that are heading for trouble?
Well, I haven't got close to the edge just yet, but I mean, in retail, I'm always pulling my hair out. Like, why am I slow? I upped my advertising. I did this. I done this. Why are we not getting customers through the door? And, then it'll be that weekend. I'm thinking about hiring another, sales guy just because we're so busy. It's just so sporadic. That's a tough part of it. But as far as getting close to the headed for trouble, I don't know if I've been close to the cliff, but, if I've had questions before on, just going from building houses and farming, I don't have a lot of knowledge in, the back end kind of stuff like, in the marketing and, stuff like that. So it's nice to have a phone number, and we have a communication platform where, we call and, type your questions, and you get all the feedback from, 40 different, people that are, been in the same situation you have been in, and to, just to help out, to, give you their perspective on what they went through and how they, fixed it or found a solution for it. And our franchisor kind of set all that up, that communication platform where we can all hash it out on, everybody on the same page on this communication platform. And then to jump on what Kathy was saying about kind of relying on some of the franchisors' knowledge. I mean, there's a lot of franchisors that have been doing this 25, 30 years. I watched my dad do it for a number of years, and it's nice to have for our franchisor to rely on us for product development, to have everybody that's been building mattresses for 20, 30 years all on one committee to help make decisions and not tell us what to do, but here, we know you guys have the knowledge. Here's your piece of paper and a pen, and you guys figure it out. And I don't want to say that they wouldn't figure it out, but man, it is sure comforting being around in a group of people that have over 150 years of experience and build mattresses to come up with a new product instead of our franchisor telling us what we're going to do. Like I said, I'm sure it may have worked, but I think what we have going now with the different franchisees all on a committee, the marketing committee and the product development committee and others, you could really hash things out with all the knowledge that we have instead of being told what to do. And I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. No, and going back to our session the other day, we were talking about change management, and certainly filtering or I guess bringing in change into a system is a lot easier, when the franchisees are driving that change. So, whether it's product development like you're talking about, it's the franchisees that are driving that. So, Ted, how about you? Can you talk a little bit about, any challenges that you may have had or other franchisees in your organization, and how that was, I guess, handled at the corporate level?
Yeah, Yeah, I did get to the edge of the cliff, and I mean, a good gust of wind would have had me. I had a couple trucks, and it got started, and I was working probably 65, 70 hours a week, as was my wife. And at that time, we didn't realize that our growth wasn't going to come from doing more events, but it was going to come from doing bigger and better events. And we didn't know any better, and we just believed that, in order to be financially successful, we were going to have to work 100 hours a week, and we knew that just wasn't possible and wasn't sustainable. And but we prevailed, and we kind of hung in there, and we learned over the course of time that the growth of your business happens in a natural progression organically, because you just get smarter about what events to book and which ones not to book. And then the gravity of the brand helps. So you grow sales by that way and not by working more hours. So I can really relate to people that get started and are working hard, and sometimes they get a little confused about how their business is going to grow, and they tend to think it's got to grow by doing more events, not by doing maybe percentage-wise a little more events, but you're substantially growing your business by doing larger and bigger events. And that's one of the ways I think I'm able to directly relate to these people that need some help on the Elevate program, by helping them understand that the first year or two can be a struggle, because you've just not gained the traction that you'll have by the time you hit your third year, when you start having as many events come to you as you try to go out to them. So, and successful in doing that in Florida with a franchisee that was struggling even more than I was. And they are a success story for us now, because they just kept implementing the program, kept providing the Kona Ice experience, and now they are into their, I think in December they'll hit their third year, and they are looking to grow. And actually, they're one of the leaders of the East Coast community there in Florida. So a huge success story there, in a franchisee that was able to benefit from the Elevate program, benefit from the knowledge that I was able to share with them about my journey, and them making the corrections necessary to be successful now.
Right.
But Eric, let me chime in here, Eric, just a second. But I think that's a very great story, and it's a lot of credit to Ted. He shows up to help work with them, but it's not just theory, and it's not just, hey, here's what you should do. Hey, let's get in your truck or get in your store or whatever, and let's just go. And he went and took him into events, and took him into schools, and started talking, having conversations, and just very hands-on. And we've got several veteran franchisees on that Elevate group as mentors and coaches, and that's what we look for, is veteran franchisees mature. How do you keep them engaged? So I know that's one of the topics that you were asking. How do you keep veterans? Yeah. Get them engaged in the mentoring process. Everyone loves to teach to some degree and share their knowledge, and and it's not necessarily where you have to pay them a ton of money. How about a free convention fee or whatever, something like that, where get involved. And we elected our franchisee ad council, and we've also kind of morphed them into leaders of and those were through popular elections in regions around the country. We have 12 regions around the country, and elected people that obviously those are the most popular franchisees, and they are becoming this arm. We're going to turn those franchisees over quickly, but every 2 years. But then we're also going to have them as groups of very veteran franchisees that now we can help and mentor, and then you give them the opportunity. You'd be surprised how people respond to the opportunity to help other people, and we have to do that, because we're such a frugal franchise system. We're not charging massive amounts of royalty and things like that. So and everyone knows it, and we have to be frugal. We have to be quick of feet. And it works that way. So everyone gets involved, and you hear this real camaraderie and culture of communication that's just blowing it up. But that's a simple story on the surface that Ted told, but it's very deep and rich in how he did it. So just didn't want to let that just fly by.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And Kathy, I mean, that's a huge topic among franchisors, is that, keeping franchisees engaged as they become, more senior people. And, you mentioned your committees. Are there any other programs that you have at Verlo that, help address, franchisees that are getting later in their life cycle and, and keeping them engaged in the system?
For sure. I think as a franchisee pivots into these next cycles, whether it's sort of the middle or maybe the end, we as franchisors have to be mindful of offering services to them that meet them where they are. And so if you have a franchise owner that is 65 and thinking about what he or she does next with their franchise, it's helpful to have a professional come in and talk to your franchise organization about how to evaluate their business and the value of their business. What's the enterprise value? It's helpful to have someone that comes in and talks about tax planning. It's helpful to have someone come in and talk about estate planning or business transition, because for those franchisees, that's where they are, right, in the life cycle of the business. So matching services and offerings to where your franchisees are in this life cycle is really, really valuable. One of the greatest things I learned from the IFA conference just a few months ago was during their kind of TED Talk roundtable. They had the 15 minutes with people kind of talking about their story. And one gentleman, and I forget the company, he was explaining how early on they started using franchisees as quasi-employees of corporate. And they did it because they didn't have a lot of money and they were trying to make bigger. And they earmarked and they targeted people who had particular disciplines and expertise prior to coming into the franchise. So if you needed someone to help you think about supply chain, they were hiring a guy who had been in the supply chain system for Walmart to help them figure out the supply chain for their franchise. Or you had someone who came out of a marketing background. There's nothing wrong with the franchisor paying or bringing a franchisee in to provide professional services on behalf of the whole franchise system. And I think, again, as franchisors, we have to think a little bit more creatively about not just the value that we add, but the value that we can gain from the tremendous amount of expertise that most franchisees bring to the table prior to joining our franchise. And so one thing I'm going to test next year is providing sort of, consulting type projects for certain franchisees who A, have the expertise, B, have the bandwidth, and C, have the respect of the organization to go out and do work on behalf of the franchisor. I have a better shot of getting people to adopt it and accept it from someone that they trust than calling someone from McKinsey to come in and do it.
Right.
And I think the franchisee appreciates being seen and being visible and being positioned as a leader and someone that the franchisor, respects and trusts. So it's really a win-win on both sides. Yeah,
great point. Stieg, how about you from the franchisee perspective, as we're talking about, really more support. I know you're not that tenured in the system, although it's been in the family for a long time. What type of support have you experienced that you found the most valuable?
I mean, total support. I would say probably the most influential was getting, learning how to train my sales guys. I kind of had it tough because I was coming into a business that was already established. There was already employees in place way before me. We've got a guy that's been there 22 years and another guy's been there 12 years. So I was really struggling with coming in, being the quote unquote boss now for, these guys that have been already doing this for so long. And I reached out just to help on, learning how to train. And it wasn't really personally training them. Our franchisor actually has some, digital stuff that I put in place that kind of made them change their habits, that they've progressed their own habits over the last 20 something years themselves. And not that it was completely terrible, but there was just a better way to do it on some things. And I really had trouble doing that, because I didn't want to come in and have I grew up around them, and that was a really tough one on me, to try to get them to do what I want them to do. Not completely change what they're doing, but just kind of tweak it a little bit. And I reached out for help, and I solved the problem without creating enemies or any kind of bad. That's kind of tough to come in and start a guy brand new off a tractor that was planting corn a year ago, to come in and try to tell you what to do that you've already been doing for 20 years.
Right.
So it was help to have somebody that was willing to help and have the knowledge to help me kind of work through that. So I would say that's definitely the best, the best thing I had going from the corporate service.
Right. I know we're going to run out of time here shortly, and we do have a number of questions, and we'll try and get to as many questions as possible. And I would encourage you, if you haven't already submitted a question, to type one in. One question that I'll put out to Tony and Kathy really is, when you think about onboarding franchisees, it's like drinking from a fire hose. And I think it's that they're still in that honeymoon phase, and they only retain so much. And the question is really related to, what do you guys do as far as having field support, or the various programs that you mentioned, your franchisee programs, your Elevate programs. How do you reinforce those best practices taught during initial training out in the field? Tony, you want to start with that?
Yeah, and obviously, and Kathy said it best. We're total opposite ends of the spectrum. We have $100,000 all in and a $20,000 deposit. This is a no brick and mortar and build out. And Kathy's, your all system is much more complicated and very established and great system. For us, putting out 150 franchises a year, you really have to be a nice system in place, and following, franchisees go out. A franchisee was here 2 days ago, you got to understand, a small year, 10-year lifespan. Franchisee was here 10 years ago, and I said, hey, and he's picking up his first Kona truck. He'd already been to college, and he was coming back to pick up his truck. And I said, hey, how does your calendar look? He goes, well, we just turned our website on last week, and I've got somewhere between 15 and 20 bookings already. And, I had to laugh because, probably 3 years ago, that would not have happened. The brand is getting bigger and better, and we're starting to get some of that organic growth where people can turn on their localized website, and with our Google AdWords programs and our Facebook pushes and things like that, leads just start pouring in. And I had to laugh. So we are seeing our franchisees start out much faster and with stuff, but we have a very extensive knowledge base, online knowledge base, where people can get questions answered. We have a 24-hour support staff from maintenance issues and things like that always answers their phone. It's a 5-guy team that the number rotates to somebody that will always answer the phone. So you've got a quick response in that, but the knowledge base is we have a very concerted 30-day plan. So we really lay it out the first 30 days. Here's what you've got to do. And then when the knowledge base has their answers to their quick questions, business-wise, as well as anything maintenance goes, they have a 24-hour helpline they can call to do that, along with the mentors and the coaches, everyone following up and calling. Because it's the first 30, 60 days that everyone really needs to have their handheld the most. But our business cycle is kind of moving to the point where, I remember franchisee number 17, Mark Kenny, and I called him every single day when he went to Atlanta, first truck in Atlanta, and now there's 40 some trucks in Atlanta. But his first truck, and I called him every single day for the first 30 some days until he said, okay, I just hit it big. I did this, I did that. And I got all kinds of leads. And I said, okay, let's talk in a couple weeks. And then it became, okay, let's talk in a month or two. And now Mark is, his wife's retired from her job and they're working together. They were employing their son full time and they've got 5 franchises and they're doing great. And it's a good story, but you realize that as you change and grow. But I mean, it's nowhere in comparison to what Kathy goes through with. I mean, this is a major investment and it's really an interesting concept that they have, which I think is I just don't want to try to compare apples to oranges because I think hers is very, very different in the fact. So very interesting. And man, what a brand, 60 years, Jiminy Christmas.
Well, and you raise a great point, for not only the life cycle of the franchisee, but the life cycle of the franchisor affects these relationships as well. And that's a great conversation, again, to have with candidates before they sign on the dotted line is, for smaller systems, you are going to get that, special treatment, the CEO calling you every day when you launch in a new market. Hopefully, you'll get that. And, but as you grow, obviously that can't be the expectation. And I think a lot of franchisees that have come up through startup or smaller systems, that's where some of their challenges lie is they were used to that personal touch. And now the CEO, because of growth, just isn't accessible anymore. And so, if you don't handle that kind of transition carefully, that can come back and bite you. Kathy, just, any thoughts as far as what you guys do in that, transitioning from, the ongoing or the onboarding, and then how you then reinforce that training and best practices in field support over time?
Yeah, I appreciate that, franchises there's so many different types and there's not really a one size fits all. But I do agree that the common theme is around communication, and whether that's physical, digital, verbal, written, this idea of being constantly communicative, I think is a very strong theme that regardless of franchise type would be very valuable. I think having clear rules of engagement, I call them, whether that's your ops manual, whether that's your brand standards guide, whatever are the tools that stay in your toolbox and make that box your franchise company that makes you, having that really clearly defined